The trap. What if you ended up inside an 80s horror movie? Well, that's exactly what happens in The Final Girls. Max and her friends get sucked into Camp Bloodbath, a classic slasher full of cliches where a masked killer hunts down teenagers at camp. Sound familiar, right? At first, they try to run, but soon they realize if they follow the original script, no one is going to survive. That's when they come up with a genius idea: set a trap. Using the cabin in the woods as the setting, they prepare everything to lure the killer in and finish him once and for all. This was one of the rare times slasher characters decided not to just wait to die, but actually use their heads and flip the game. Of course, the plan doesn't go perfectly, but it's exactly that proactive move that gives them a real chance to survive. And let's be real, who hasn't yelled at the screen, "Set a trap, do something"? Well, here they did. The writer plan. In Misery, we meet Paul Sheldon, a famous romance novelist who gets into a car accident during a snowstorm. He's rescued by Annie Wilkes, his #1 fan, who takes him to her house and promises to care for him until he recovers. But soon Paul discovers Annie isn't just a devoted fan, she's an obsessed kidnapper. Stuck in bed with broken legs, he's forced to rewrite his last book, since Annie hated the original ending. But Paul doesn't give in to despair. He realizes that if he plays along with her game, he might buy time and find an opening. So he pretends to be involved in writing a new book, but in reality, he uses it as a distraction to plan his escape. The climax comes when he uses the typewriter itself and simple tools around him to fight back at the right moment. He tricks Annie, pretends to be vulnerable, and then strikes, turning the tables on his captor. He was smart because Paul didn't try to face Annie right away. That would have been suicide. He used patience, reasoning, and even his own talent as a writer to manipulate the situation in his favor. He turned the story Annie wanted into a trap for her: the pen. If there's one thing the Saw franchise makes clear, it's this: survival requires unthinkable decisions. In Saw 5, we follow a group trapped in yet another deadly game left behind by Jigsaw. Every wrong choice means death, and sometimes even the right one does too. The character here is Peter Strahm, an FBI special agent investigating Jigsaw's crimes. Locked inside a glass box that starts filling with water, Strahm finds himself with no air, no way out, and no time. And that's when he makes an extreme choice. He grabs a simple pen and stabs his own throat, improvising a tracheotomy so he can breathe. It's grotesque, painful, and desperate, but also brilliant. Because in the end, this shows that in Saw, survival isn't just about physical strength. It's about using anything within reach to stay alive, even something as simple as a pen. Headshot. If there's one thing Sidney Prescott learned, it's this: the killer never dies the first time. In Scream 2, after surviving the original massacre, Sidney is in college trying to move on with her life, but a new Ghostface shows up, repeating the terror and making everything even bloodier. In moments like this, one mistake can cost lives, but Sidney isn't like the usual slasher victims. She doesn't just knock the killer down, she makes sure he won't get back up again. Sidney makes the most logical and direct move. She shoots the villain in the head. Yes, it's brutal, but it's also extremely smart. The hanger. In Halloween, Laurie Strode just wanted a quiet night babysitting the kids, but instead, she faced the living nightmare known as Michael Myers. Unarmed, cornered, and with nowhere to run, Laurie has to act smart. That's when she spots a simple wire hanger, something so ordinary anyone would ignore it. But in the right hands, it can turn into a weapon. Quickly, she untwists the hanger, sharpens the tip, and just as Michael breaks into the closet, Laurie stabs him right in the eye. The strike doesn't kill him. After all, we're talking about Michael Myers, but it buys just enough time for Laurie to protect the kids and for Dr. Loomis to show up and intervene. It was a simple but genius move, turning a common object into her last line of defense. Playing the baby. Imagine renting an Airbnb and discovering it hides a secret so disturbing, it feels like a nightmare. In Barbarian, Tess arrives in Detroit for a job interview, but soon finds out the house she rented is already occupied by another guest. Things get weirder and weirder until she finds a basement with endless tunnels and a grotesque figure known only as Mother. Trapped in this underground horror, any wrong move means death. But Tess notices something crucial. Mother isn't just violent, she sees everyone there as her children. So, to survive, Tess makes a disturbing but brilliant choice. She starts acting like a baby. By playing baby, Tess buys herself time. She stays alive, observes her surroundings, and plans her next move without triggering the creature's rage. It's uncomfortable, it's weird, but it's smart. So what about you? Would you dare do the same as Tess, or would you risk it all on a quick escape? Stabbing Juno. In The Descent, a group of women set out to explore an isolated cave system. What should have been an adventure turns into a nightmare when they get trapped and realize they're not alone. Living there are crawlers, blind underground creatures with sharp senses that hunt any human nearby. Amid all this chaos, Sarah, the protagonist, not only fights to survive, but also faces painful personal revelations. Her friend Juno was having an affair with her late husband, and after a bloody chain of events, Sarah believes Juno was responsible for another friend's death. In the final stretch, when the two are the only survivors left, Sarah makes a brutal choice. She wounds Juno, leaving her vulnerable to the crawlers. While her friend is surrounded, Sarah takes the chance to run toward the cave's exit. It was a selfish choice, but Sarah realized that fighting the creatures alone was almost impossible, so injuring Juno gave her the vital distraction she needed to escape. Leg upgrade. In the middle of a zombie apocalypse, any regular person would be doomed. But Cherry Darling is no regular person. In Planet Terror, Cherry is a dancer who loses a leg after a brutal attack. But then, she and her ex-boyfriend Ramon come up with an idea that's insane, but also genius. They strap a full machine gun onto her leg as a prosthetic. The result? One of the most iconic weapons in horror history. An unstoppable warrior blasting away with every step. It's over the top, it's gory, it's insane, but also really brilliant. The charcoal trick. In The Taking of Deborah Logan, a team of documentarians starts off investigating the case of Deborah, an elderly woman with Alzheimer's. But what seemed like a regular illness soon reveals something far darker: demonic possession. During the investigation, the filmmakers noticed Deborah keeps dialing the same phone number, 337, but the page with that note had been ripped out of her notebook. It all seemed like a dead end, until assistant Louis comes up with a brilliant idea. He rubs charcoal on the previous page, revealing the impressions of what had been written on the torn-out sheet. Thanks to that trick, they find out the call was linked to Henri Desjardins, a man long dead and the real cause of the possession. Without that detail, the investigation would have stopped right there. But with an improvised, creative solution worthy of a Scooby-Doo detective, they managed to keep going and uncover the truth. Going all survivalist, a family dinner, a house in the middle of nowhere. Sounds like the perfect setup for a horror movie, right? In Your Next, Erin goes with her boyfriend Crispian for a weekend with his family. But the night of reunions quickly turns into a massacre when masked killers invade the house. What the invaders didn't know was that Erin wasn't your typical victim. Raised in an environment where survival training was the norm, she quickly takes control of the situation. Instead of panicking, Erin starts thinking like a warrior. She uses whatever is at hand: knives, hammers, even improvised traps made with nails and pots, and turns the house itself into a battlefield. The result? One of the smartest and most ruthless final girls in cinema. She doesn't just survive, she becomes the hunter. Silence as a weapon. In Hush, we meet Maddie Young, a writer who decided to live alone in a cabin in the woods to find peace and inspiration. But that peace is destroyed when a masked killer shows up out of nowhere and starts hunting her. The twist? Maddie is deaf and mute, so anyone would think she's at a complete disadvantage. But that's exactly when Maddie shows just how smart she can be.
You can't outrun him on that leg.
I can't outrun him on that
down
leg.
With a crossbow, but that has to be a perfect shot. In the heart or in the brain.
Heart or the brain.
Anything else is not going to cut it.
Won't cut it.
And that's a long-distance weapon.
That's a long-distance weapon.
Pretty much useless indoors. It's
useless
really
indoors.
tough up close, and you'd have to be up close to land a kill shot.
Since she can't hear the killer's footsteps, she starts using the environment and simple objects in the house as improvised weapons. Knives, flashlights, alarms. Everything becomes a resource. And more than that, she realizes the killer underestimates her condition, thinking she's an easy target. Seriously. Watching this movie is nerve-wracking. The guy toys with her like she's helpless, but he never imagined Maddie would use her deafness as an advantage. She creates distractions, confuses him, and even makes him fall into quickly prepared traps inside her own home. In the end, the hunt flips. The victim stops being the prey and becomes the hunter. Maddie didn't try to escape who she was. She turned her biggest limitation into a weapon. And by the way, my favorite part is at the very end. The guy sneaks up behind her thinking he's about to finish her off, but makes one mistake.
I think that you're holding out on me. I bet if I hit the right spot, I can make you scream.
Bringing Freddy to reality. In A Nightmare on Elm Street, we meet Freddy Krueger, one of the most iconic villains in horror. A killer who attacks his victims inside their dreams, turning sleep into a true, inescapable nightmare. Nancy Thompson, the movie's final girl, discovers that fighting Freddy in the dream world is useless. There, he's unbeatable, twisting reality however he wants and killing at will. But Nancy is clever. When she manages to pull an object from the dream into real life, she realizes that's the key to winning. If Freddy can cross the barrier, he stops being an untouchable phantom and becomes human. So Nancy comes up with a risky plan. She sets up a bunch of homemade traps in her house and offers herself as bait. When she faces Freddy in the dream, she grabs him and forces herself awake, dragging the monster into the real world. Nancy didn't try to fight Freddy by his rules. She changed the game, bringing the enemy into the only arena where she had a chance to survive: the invisible plan. How do you fight an enemy you can't even see? In The Invisible Man, Cecilia Cass escapes from an abusive relationship with Adrian Griffin, a brilliant and obsessive scientist. When he apparently commits suicide, Cecilia thinks she's finally free, but soon she realizes Adrian isn't dead. He created a suit that makes him invisible, and now he stalks her, manipulating everyone around her into thinking she's gone insane. Step by step, Cecilia is discredited, isolated, and pushed to the limit. But instead of giving up, she does something brilliant. She uses Adrian's own obsession against him. First, she fakes taking her own life to lure him in. When he gets close, she strikes, turning the tables. Later, she goes even further, using the vision tech and the suit itself to expose Adrian in front of everyone, proving it wasn't madness. It was real terror. That decision is smart because it shows Cecilia doesn't just survive, she takes back control. She turns the villain's weapon into her own ally, Laurie's trap. This moment happens in Halloween, 2018, a movie that works as a direct sequel to the 1978 classic. All the other sequels in the franchise are ignored, creating a new timeline. 40 years after the original massacre, Laurie Strode still lives in Michael Myers' shadow. But instead of being just a traumatized victim, she spent all those years preparing for the killer's inevitable return. And when Michael finally escapes and comes back to Haddonfield, Laurie shows she's ready. During the climax, Michael chases Laurie, her daughter Karen, and her granddaughter Allison inside the fortified house. But what looks like a cat and mouse game is actually part of a meticulous plan. Laurie uses her own family as bait to lure Michael exactly where she wants him. When he's finally drawn into the basement, Laurie triggers her trap. Metal bars seal the passage, turning the house into an improvised prison. Right after, she releases gas and sets the place on fire, trapping Michael in the flames. Just think about it. Laurie spent 4 decades preparing, turning fear into strategy. She didn't just survive, and she turned her house into a weapon, using Michael against himself. Using the time loop. In Happy Death Day, student Tree Gelman wakes up on her birthday, only to be murdered by a masked killer at night. The twist? As soon as she dies, she wakes up again at the start of the same day, stuck in an endless time loop. At first, Tree panics, but soon she realizes this curse can actually be an advantage. Every repeat of the day is a chance to learn, test theories, and figure out the killer's identity. With each death, she improves her reactions, avoids dangerous encounters, crosses suspects off the list, and even grows stronger physically and emotionally. Along the way, Tree not only discovers who's behind the mask, but also changes as a person, saving lives, including Carter's, the sweet guy who helps her in the investigation. Instead of giving in to despair, Tree chooses to use the loop as a survival lab. She turns her worst nightmare into a chance to grow and find answers. From a helpless victim, she becomes the hunter. The light trick. In Lights Out, Rebecca starts noticing that her family is being tormented by something impossible to explain. A creature called Diana, who only appears when the lights go out. In the dark, she moves fast and attacks without mercy, but just one beam of light makes her vanish. That detail becomes the key to survival. Rebecca and the others realize they don't need brute strength to fight the supernatural. They need intelligence. Any light source becomes a weapon. Flashlights, candles, phones, even car headlights. That choice was super smart because they turned something everyday and accessible into a survival tool. While in so many horror movies characters run without thinking, here they quickly identify the creature's weakness and push it to the limit. These moments prove that in horror, survival isn't just about luck, it's about intelligence. And now I want to know, which of these choices did you think was the smartest? Drop your opinion in the comments, like the video, and subscribe to the channel. On the screen, there's another great video. I'll see you there.